Good morning. We are going to start our service with Spirit of Life, hymn number 123. And I would now like to welcome, if we have a board member here with announcements, to come forward. Sure, Carol, thank you. If you can just bring them forward, I'll go ahead and read anything that might be in there. The February outreach collection has been for the organization BAM, Building African American Minds. Several of our members have volunteered for this organization for many years. This is an after-school and summer program devoting to improving outcomes for African American children here in Talbot County. More details are in our weekly newsletter. To donate, you may leave a check in the basket in the back of the sanctuary with Outreach Collection BAM written in the memo, or you may make your donation online through our website. Thank you. That is our only board announcement, and I would also like to invite Jim Richardson right now. He's going to say a few words for the sake of pledge inspiration as we all reflect on renewing our pledge to UUFE this spring.
Good morning. When I read about the war in the Ukraine, when I think about refugees, climate change, and COVID, when I feel overwhelmed with fake news, racism, and gun violence in our country, like you, I feel a bit helpless. But still, there remains in my heart a feeling of hope and celebration, a time for celebration. I think this is the time for celebration. I think back many years ago, 31 years to be exact, when Reverend Dan Higgins gave me the gift. Although I didn't know what the gift was at the time, he said to me, "You may not know this, but you are a Unitarian Universalist, and I want you to come to church with me next Sunday." Much has changed since then. The building, the ministers, the members of this fellowship. But much is still the same. Our principles that guide us, our Sunday church services, the songs we sing together, also our children's RE program. Both my daughters, Hannah and Emma, were fortunate enough to go through the fellowship's RE children's program. It was a gift Martha and I gave to them. For me, I decided this year that my pledge is a gift to our children, not my children, all of our children. The children now and the children of the future. My pledge, especially this year, is about hope for the future of these children. We inherited this fellowship from members who are no longer with us. They passed this gift on to us. Now we need to take their gift and pass it to the next generation. But the only way we can do this is to continue to be active and healthy in a healthy spiritual congregation. This congregation doesn't run on air. It doesn't run on grants from the outside. It runs on your pledges every year, and it needs your continual support from each one of you. Simply put, without your pledge, the gift can't be passed on. Thank you.
It was written by 19th century Ukrainian composer, I don't want to pronounce it incorrectly, Mykola Vitalyevich Lesenko.
I would like to formally welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship at Easton. I'm Christina Drostin, and I will be leading the service today. I am joined by Bob Clegg, and I'm happy to have him here presenting our sermon here shortly. I'm joined today by many people within our fellowship who make Sunday mornings possible. We're grateful to have music this morning offered by Ellen. We are eternally grateful for Bojena's ongoing work with our IT services and hope that she recovers soon from her cold that she has at home, and much thanks to Dave Moore for stepping up today. Thank you to our usher, Don Barker, to our greeter, Rita, and to Linda for doing the order of service. We are an intentionally welcoming congregation. We invite you to be part of this community. When we make this statement, we are stating our vision of love and acceptance. We welcome you, your background and beliefs, all racial and ethnic identities, sexual orientation and gender identities, theological perspectives, You are all welcomed and accepted. If you have questions about this congregation or the UU faith, ask a member or speak with one of us after the service, one of our greeters, or ask myself. We're happy to tell you more. After the service, everybody is welcome to head outside where we can unmask comfortably with each other and spend some time socializing and catching up. At this time, I would like to introduce Bob Clegg, our guest today. He is a minister at the Unitarian Universalist, he is a member at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Frederick, Maryland. He holds a Master of Divinity from Wesley Theological Seminary and a graduate certificate in nonprofit management from American University. He is a lay community minister, now serving as the executive director of Justice Jobs of Maryland in Frederick. Justice Jobs is a free jobs office that helps people get jobs, keep jobs, get good references, and move up to better jobs. Bob and his wife, Connie, live in Newmarket, Maryland with their spoiled, rotten cat, Lily. At this time, I want to welcome Bob as he is going to lead us in a chalice lighting.
Thank you, Christina. The chalice, we light our chalice this morning. And we light it with these words from James Luther Adams, a Unitarian theologian active in the mid-20th century. He wrote an essay, Principles for a Free Faith. It's preceded our principles, and you may recognize some of the words here. Adams writes, "We gather as Unitarian Universalists to understand, articulate, and live our liberal religion. David brought down the giant Goliath." Think about it. David brought down the giant Goliath with 5 smooth stones, but we use our 5 smooth stones to build a more just, loving, and free world. Our first stone reminds us that we are part of a living tradition in which revelation is continuous. Together as people of conscience, together we engage in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Our second stone reminds us that we freely choose to enter into relationship and community with each other. Together as people of conscience, we build relationships of justice, equity, and compassion that further the wholeness of the interdependent web of all existence. Our third stone reminds us that we have a moral obligation to work toward establishing a just and loving community. Together we speak and act prophetically with the goal of world community, with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Our fourth stone reminds us that good things happen as a result of human effort. Together as beings with inherent worth and dignity, we create goodness and virtue. And our fifth stone reminds us that the divine and human capacities for achieving meaningful change are reason for optimism. Together we may be hopeful that change will occur toward a more just, loving, and free world. The roots of our living tradition have been developed over centuries, but new ideas and understandings are still being revealed. Some stones are smooth and polished, while others are newly found and rough. We are part of this living tradition. Through it, we become whole, and through us, our tradition becomes whole. Join together for the covenant of our fellowship. Christina, would you like to lead?
You can find a copy of the covenant in the order of service, and we'll read it aloud together now. At the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship at Easton, we seek to nurture spiritual and intellectual growth for all ages, and to be actively involved in community outreach and service, cherishing diversity and celebrating our oneness with all humanity. We want to support each other in the spirit of compassion, respect, and love. And now we just have a couple shifts in our order of service. If you would like to open your hymn to 352, we will sing Find a Stillness. At this time, we are going to move into our joys and sorrows before the meditation. Each week, we take time to share what is in our heart and troubling our minds. As we continue with hybrid services, we ask folks to submit joys and sorrows via the text on Zoom, which I'll keep an eye on and read out loud for those who want to share from home. If people would like to come up to share a joy or concern, I would like to first share one that I think is weighing on all of our hearts with the war that is affecting millions and millions of lives around the world, particularly in the Ukraine. Let us now take time to hold what we have heard and all that which has not been spoken, and reflect on the joys and concerns that remain unsaid. For all that has been shared, as well as those that remain silent in our hearts, we are grateful. Amen. And now Bob will be leading us in the meditation.
This will be a meditation in words, a reflection really, followed by meditation in music, and then meditation in more words, what we call the sermon. I have a friend named Jim Stam, who was a philosophy professor at American University, and I've been lunch with this man really every 2 or 3 weeks for 20 years. He recently moved to New Jersey to assisted living, and he has a large enough place. I'm grateful that I can go up and do overnighters there. And so I visit him about every 6 weeks for Saturday afternoon and Sunday. Our conversations are amazing. I'm just barely smart enough to keep it peppering Jim with questions that are relevant. And it's a lovely friendship. This past weekend, he told me about the history of the Peloponnesian War, which was the first history written by Thucydides in around 420, an account of the war between Athens and her allies and Sparta and her allies. And there came to be a truce in the war, a ceasefire. And so the Athenians, with nothing else to do, decided to go over to this little island of Melos, since they were down there with their ships anyway. They went over to Melos, and the Melosians were neutral in this conflict. And the Athenians came in and said, well, we want you to be our allies and our good friends. And so we offer you this opportunity to become that. And the Melosians said, thank you, but we'd rather not. We want to stay neutral. And the Athenians said, well, we'll make you a deal. If you become our allies and good friends, then we'll charge you only a fair tribute that you can pay each year. And we also won't take your men and kill your men and take your women and children into slavery. And we won't populate the place with 300 Athenian citizens. And the Melosians said, well, no, that's not going to work either. And so they went back and forth about all of the reasons that they should or shouldn't accept the deal. And finally, the Melosians said, you know, and we know, and the gods know. There is no justice between parties of unequal power. You have more power than we have, and there is no justice that's possible here because you're dictating terms from a position of power. This has more to do with things than just the news of this week. It's a story that resonates well at justice jobs, where people with prison records or suffering the effects of ageism, sexism, genderism, racism, people with barriers to employment, including child care issues and transportation problems and technology barriers. People with substance use disorder are sitting in front of employers who have a job that they desperately want. But even in a hiring economy, they're not going to overcome those barriers without some help. We are able, in some of those cases, to balance the power by coaching job seekers on what to say to bring themselves up in the eyes of the employer to closer to a position of equal power where more justice may prevail. This is the nature of all social justice work, leveling out power imbalances, because there's no justice between parties of grossly unequal power. In the moment that follows the meditation and music that Ellen will play, I ask you to reflect on ways in our individual lives that we can make justice happen between parties by empowering the less powerful. Thank you, Ellen. I haven't heard that song in 40 years, and I still know the words. And I didn't know that. Thank you so much. Just popped in my head this sweet, sweet spirit. No, in revival, we shall leave this place. There's a switch or two or three in the order of service this morning, and one of those is the switch in the top. It's not a huge switch. We had planned to talk about our UU principles as a spiritual practice. And we've switched that to doubt as a spiritual practice or something like that. That's what we'll be thinking about, doubt as a spiritual practice. Think about it. That's an odd grouping of words. Spiritual practice, or religious practice at least, is often thought of as belief, and I'm certain, yada yada. Who's really certain of what? Karl Barth is not, well, I'm certain he's not a particular fan of mine. And theologically, Karl and I don't see eye to eye on much of anything, but there's one thing he said that I love. He said that you should always preach with a Bible in one hand and a newspaper in the other. And I agree with Dr. Bartle on about half of that, or a little bit more. The newspaper piece works for me, and the Bible piece, that makes it a little more than half for me, because certainly our fourth UU principle, or our fourth UU source, the holy writings from Jewish and Christian traditions, that's not put there just as window dressing. We do have a tradition that comes from those sources and that can be useful if we look deep enough, and we'll look at that this morning. When we've all seen the news this week, and I don't need to recapitulate that. I'm reminded, though, of my friend Nick from UUCF, who plays the piano there, a professional pianist, great pianist, and he told me a while back, he said, it was another topic, but he said, I always wanted to live to see the world come to its senses in my lifetime. I really wanted to see that. And I think I told you this in January when I spoke to you from UU's of Chester River by Zoom. But it's really relevant this morning too. It seems like we've had a setback in the last few years. It was 13 years ago that I suffered from a temporary manic delusion that the United States had become post-racial. But that turns out to have been a flirtation with post-racial society. Hopefully it was a crest in a pattern of 2 steps forward, 1 back that will continue, but certainly not an even progression. It reminds me of Reinhold Niebuhr's religious pragmatism that I also referred to a couple months ago. In his book, Moral Man and Immoral Society, forgive the title, it was written in 1932, Moral People and Immoral Society, okay? He posited that one person can be moral, maybe in a desert ascetic somewhere, although that desert ascetic may be immoral by their absence. 2 people together are sooner or later bound to cross. With 3 people, we start getting triangulation and estrangement, teaming up. With larger groups like families, even congregations, and certainly governments, we have real problems, and somebody ends up getting short shrift. I've lost a page, so what I can tell you, I really don't, I've hit a hard spot, so y'all pray for me if you would. There is, I'm not sure what the transition here is, but that'll speed us up too, so that's great. We have, if we look around for, let's just speak from the heart here. if we look around for help in getting through this, how are we going to get help through getting through this? Many of us are really torn up about what's going on this week. Niebuhr is a good place to start because Niebuhr talks about religious pragmatism. I love his first book. I really don't get into the rest of it because he took it off in a really Christian direction, and I have some baggage there. But the practical nature of what Niebuhr is espousing is that we have to work where we're planted, and we seek constantly to make our world larger, to make our positive influence larger. And we also seek to work on the inside job, the religious piece of it, which is on the inside, in order to do our social justice work on the outside, whether that is here in Easton, more broadly in Maryland, or internationally. We seek a pragmatic approach so that we can have the best effect that we can. Jimmy Carter took this into his presidency, this philosophy that he wasn't going to fix the whole world, but that he could fix the part of it that he could fix. And he turned out to be a much better past president than president, or more effective, I would say anyway. I'm not sure about better. His nonprofit is based on that practical approach of achieving measurable results and doing good things in the world. If we look at I'd like to introduce you to a book called Doubt, A History. It's by Jennifer Michael Heck. This book sits on my reading table where the Bible sat on my dad's reading table. And it's about as marked up and dog-eared as my mom's Bible was. This has become one of my holy books. It was written about 2001 by a historian. It's a history of doubt. And in a little over 500 pages, she goes from 600 BCE to the present day and looks into the future on a history of doubt. And what her thesis, her basic thesis, is that doubt can be a spiritual practice. For those of us who are confronted in traditional religion with practices and suppositions that we just can't go for, that we're just not cut out to believe, doubt can provide meaning in our lives. She lays out the human condition. So glad I brought this now. She lays out the human condition in a more clear-cut way than I think I've ever seen it phrased. She says, if humanity's central existential difficulty comes from the fact that we have humanness, that we have consciousness, hopes, dreams, loneliness, shame, that we have plans, a memory, a sense of fairness, and love. If we have all these things and our universe does not, that means that we're constantly trying to wrangle our needs out of a universe that does not tend in such directions. If we're looking for meaning, for fulfillment in the universe, if you are built like I am, forget about it. We have to find it in our own lives, in our own practice. We have to bring meaning to the universe. That doesn't mean it's not true. That doesn't mean that meaning is false or fictitious. We can experience it as a reality. And that's the beauty of where I've been led by Unitarian Universalism, where 12-step groups failed to lead me for 25 years, and where I had been left in the spiritual desert for 40 years since the last time I sang Sweet, Sweet Spirit as a 16 and 18-year-old. Coming back in and singing with other people. We experienced that this morning, I think, for the first time in a while. That was the thing I missed the most about church for nearly 40 years. And I missed that without believing a word of it. Doubt is a practice. Heck lays out really 7 practices or 7 categories for doubt. She lays out science, materialism, rationalism, Lucretius on the nature of things, from about 300 BCE. Epicurus before that. The idea that a godless world is a miracle to behold. An amazing statement. Out in the divine. Another category, a second category she lays out, is that of non-theistic transcendence programs, which is a fancy word for religions without gods. Think of Buddhism, Taoism, modern Hinduism. Modern Hindus pretty much know and would agree that the little images beside the doorways are not gods with personalities, thinking beings in heaven, but they're an object for their meditation. They're an Ishtadevata. An Ishtadevata of a different sort, giant statue of the Pioneer Mother on the University of Oregon campus carried me through one of the darkest periods in my life when I needed to pray, and I didn't know what to pray to. And a friend said, why don't you pray to her? You know she's not a reality, but fix your meditation on her, and that will keep the other images of prayer from coming in. And that transformed my religious life into one where now I don't pray to anything. My prayers have become my actions and my feet. Doubt as a practice can be the moral rejection of injustice, like the doubt of Job and other survivors. We'll talk about Job in a minute. It can be the doubt of graceful life philosophies, guides for life without belief. My favorite morning reader that I'm using right now is titled Beyond Belief, Agnostic Musings for 12-Step Life. And the subtitle is Finally, a Daily Reflection Book for Non-Believers, Freethinkers, and Everyone Else. There's nothing in it that a fundamentalist would object to. Most likely, most of them wouldn't anyway. There are a few facts, but it is just secular, but spiritual. Philosophical skepticism is another category of doubt as a practice. Rejection of all philosophies based on the sheer variety of them. Some of the ancient Greeks were there. The doubt of any ardent believer, finally. And that includes my mom and my dad. My dad, as a Baptist minister, talked guardedly about his Christian agnosticism, his continuing doubt in all of the propositions of Christianity, whether there was anything there for him. And he rationalized that that was okay because with his doubt, his religious faith became faith. He said, if I had no doubt, it would just be sheer knowledge, and that's cheap. Doubt has been celebrated and studied in literature down through the ages. It's been studied it's been talked about by Socrates, the Stoics, classical rationalism. Christianity, Mark is the most doubtful book in the New Testament. I preached on that here. In the original version of Mark, before the last 12 verses that were tacked on afterwards, Jesus doesn't get resurrected. It's left with a question mark. Buddhism, Taoism, Islam, the Enlightenment. I'd like to talk to a couple of examples. One is Ecclesiastes in the Hebrew Bible, what Christians call the Old Testament. It's so out of sync with the rest of the Bible, Ecclesiastes is, that scholars have long marveled that it actually got in at all. The book was just too beautiful, too smart, too pious in its own weird way to be left out. It's an amazing study in doubt. How to live best in a world without divine justice, without an afterlife, without any overarching meaning. Qoheleth, the author of Ecclesiastes, writes, be not righteous over much, neither make thyself over wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Don't be over wicked, Neither be foolish. Why should you die before your time? He said, under the sun, the race is not to the swift, the battle not to the strong, nor the bread to the wise, nor riches to the learned, nor favor to the skillful, but time and chance happen to them all. There is such a thing in his world as the swift and the strong and the wise. He's not rejecting the idea of value. He's just saying train, excel, and rejoice in your labors, but don't assume that the battle always goes to the strong, because it doesn't. Time and chance happen to them all. Another great example from the book of books. It's an anthology. It's not a linear history or even a history of a culture. It's an anthology that the Hebrew Bible is, and another piece in that is Job, another source for tradition on study and doubt. Many of you remember the story in short. The winds came, the mountains fell down on his house, crushed all his sons and daughters, killed all his livestock, left him sitting with boils and pestilences. And his friends came to him and said, you know, you really must have done something to piss God off, because look at all that's happened to you. And he refuses to accept this idea. He says, I didn't deserve it. This happened to me. Crap happens sometimes. And if God is at fault, then let me speak to God, because I've got a bone to pick with him. Job has fully accepted the idea that sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, and you got to take it on the chin. His friends insist that justice is orderly, that the universe works according to decisions and justice, that it has a mind of its own, and Job chokes on that notion because he recognizes those to be traits of his own, much more than they are traits of the mind of the universe. I cannot identify with that. Martin Buber, who is most notably known for writing I and Thou, but had a wide-ranging theological career, called Job one of the special events in world literature in which we witness the first clothing of a human quest in the form of speech. God does show up in the end and does not even try to refute Job's questions about justice. God changes the subject and argues for his merit as a creator of creation, not of justice. If God is just, then it's not justice as we know it. A third example would be Rabelais, the Renaissance satirist who wrote Gargantuan and Pantagruel, some of the most ribald writings, shocking theological writings that you can come up with. The message Heck characterizes as this: confront death as an absolute. Make some meaning on loving your family. Have a carousing good time now and then, drinking deeply of ideas. Let that metaphor end in a hangover now and then, and do the work of wisdom, reading, writing, and meditation on the truth. And finally, our principles themselves are a statement of doubt. This was to have been the topic of the sermon today. Our principles don't state belief in anything but the righteousness of justice, equity, and compassion, inherent worth and dignity, our need to accept each other and give aid in mutual spiritual growth, the goal of world community, and the interdependent web. That's what we believe in, not what we think is true in terms of ultimate reality, but what we think is true in terms of how we ought to behave. They refuse to address traditional religious belief. They're a statement of doubt themselves. But they leave room for whatever belief we may have, whether that be progressive Christianity or Buddhism, or you name it. They can be also seen as a path from isolation, from the first principle, where we are an individual with inherent worth in being, to total community, making our work progressively larger all the way through to where we are completely interconnected, enlightened, if you would, in Principle 7. So what can we do as individuals? How can we bring justice to this universe? First, there's our individual practice behind closed doors. which changes us and keeps us changing and keeps our spiritual blade sharp, so that when we emerge from there, we're prepared to do justice in the world without it being an ego trip. As individuals, what can we do? Few are so situated as to be secretaries of state or even high up in that organization and have any meaningful impact on the geopolitical conversation right now. If you are, please, I'll start praying again for you. But if you want to send money to Ukraine, I was informed by a friend. There were 61,000 rooms booked on Airbnb on March 2nd and 3rd, more than half of them by Americans, people who really don't intend to show up. If you want to pump money into that economy at the grassroots citizen level, rent a room in Ukraine on Airbnb. And don't ask them to change the sheets. Ours is not a religion of social justice. Social justice is what we do. It's an outgrowth of that religion. Our theology or religion is the inside job. Social justice, that's our world out in the world, providing food and shelter, legal support, providing help to people who are lower on Maslow's hierarchy of needs than we are. Doing the inside work of that religion is the essence of our religious practice. That's our faith. Our faith was articulated by James Luther Adams as, it was a paraphrase from the book of Hebrews. He went from there. Hebrews 11:1 says, faith is the certainty of things unseen, the substance of things hoped for. I'm sorry, I don't have any certainty in things unseen. I'm not sorry. I'm not built that way. And I can't think myself into believing something I don't believe. James Luther Adams was of the same ilk. And he changed that. He said, faith is the certainty that we have everything we need. Everything we need to solve all our problems together. We're not statically good people. We must continually work on ourselves as well as on the world to maintain goodness and to grow it and accentuate it. So I don't offer you a panacea. There's no magic bullet. But the solution, it seems to me, is one of accepting the conundrum, doing our work, being as responsible as we can be, and trying to influence the world, those around us, toward the good, focusing on the process and not the result. If you're results-oriented in the extreme and focus only on the result, you'll end up frustrated and a wandering spirit. Human society has been a work in progress for at least 10,000 years, if not 250,000. And its shortcomings, it would be hubris for me to imagine, as I used to do, that we could solve those problems in the 80 to 90 years that I'm on this planet. But I do get to have an experience in those 80, 90 years that perhaps nothing else in the universe besides other people gets to have. The experience of knowing, the experience of sentience, of self-knowing. It's a matter of responsible perspective. If you're walking past a bombed out building, are you going to focus on the craters in the walls, or are you going to focus on the roses, still red roses, still blinding red right in front of the building? Which are you going to focus on? Both. You'll admire and love the beauty of the roses, and then you'll get to work helping to rebuild the building. You bring the two poles, the dialectic, into a middle ground resolution so that the universe is atoned or at one. Toned at one. If you take just one thing from this morning, I hope it's this. The world doesn't have to make sense. We can create meaning in a meaningless universe. In fact, we do so both for our own sake and for the sake of others. For those sakes, it may be our responsibility to do so. By using our limited knowledge of the universe, our limited power as localized being, and our own peculiar sense of justice, we can reconcile theodicy, which is the conflict, the three-way conflict between those things of God's supposed ultimate knowledge, ultimate power, and ultimate fairness. You can't have all three. You can only have two of the three. On a limited basis, we can bring justice into the universe by working those three pieces in a practical way. Whether you're providing food and shelter for people, or helping people with barriers to get jobs, or fighting against human-caused climate change, or fighting racism, sexism, ageism, ableism, genderism, other forms of discrimination, or sending money to Ukraine, equitable disaster relief, which you may have heard about on Christmas Tippett this morning, or whether you work on the international stage, as does one of our volunteers who disappears every few months to Mozambique or the Ivory Coast to work on World Bank aid programs. At whatever level you find yourself at, let us do our work, then step back. As the Tao Te Ching admonishes, do your work, then step back. The world is not all good, but neither is it all bad. Let us bring the good and the bad together into our own experience and experience it as the way things are. Christina, I have lost my, there we go. We're not going to sing Find a Stillness because we already sang that. What are we singing?
We're singing number 95.
Number 95, There's More Love Somewhere. We'll stand and sing our closing hymn. Number 95, There's More Love Somewhere.
You have perfect relative pitch. We are not singing it in the key.
And in closing, maybe go forth in the certainty of faith, the knowledge of love, and in the vision of hope. In our going, may we be blessed with all good things. As we close our service, I would like to invite and encourage people to step outside so that we can spend a bit more time connecting with each other. That human connection now is more important than ever. While you're still inside, please remain masked, but we can unmask if people are comfortable without outside. I'll meet you the people online can have an online social time as well.